And good evening. Are you ready for your delivery of the Steel Truth? I'm Ann Vandersteel. I hope everybody's doing fantastic this beautiful evening. We've got a great show for you tonight. Want to just thank, of course, our sponsors, as always, yournews.com, which carries this show under the Ann Vandersteel section. We're a national news story for them. And they are a local generated newsmaker that brings in about over 100 local markets into their national brand where you can get everything. So no matter where you live in the country, you can search by your zip code. You can upload your own news stories, sort of like social media style. And you can also get access to classified ads all for free. Imagine that. That is so super exciting. Range Broadcasting carries this show also on their Roku, Amazon, and Apple TV stations on your smart television, and our great friends over at Conservative Choice Campaign. Pay attention to these folks, these people, folks, because conservativechoicecampaign.com, fantastic website. They carry the Rudy Giuliani podcast as well, myself and others coming on the scene, and they are working really hard to bring in MAGA candidates. So I wanted to just make sure you guys check them all out, show them some love. Tonight, we've got an incredible show for you, and I have to say, you meet a lot of people doing the work I do. I've interviewed a ton of people, everybody from Dinesh D'Souza, Corey Lewandowski, on down the line, some incredible patriots around the world that I've spoken to. It's a privilege to be able to do this day in and day out. But not very often do you meet young people with the talent of this young man, Daniel Bolan. Not only is he an author, an aspiring lawyer, Eagle Scout, Orange County, Florida Citizen of the Year, he's also an expert bowler. And he just recently sent me a super box of really cool t-shirts and his bowling jersey and all this awesome paraphernalia, backpacks. I mean, he's sponsored by Subaru. It's like unbelievable, all the swag I got. Totally fired up about it all. But there's much more to Daniel than just swag. He's got swag, but there's more to him than just stuff. It's really what's under the hood that you're going to learn about tonight. And I'm really excited to bring him on here because right now Daniel is a candidate. He's a candidate with a majors in political science. He's also studying international affairs, along with Russian artificial intelligence at the Florida State University. So he's up there, doing the tomahawk chalk with his friends, but he's actually putting a lot of stuff under the hood. I mean, again, I've interviewed Charlie Kirk before, and I have hats off to Charlie Kirk, but this kid is, Charlie Kirk on steroids, in my humble opinion. And you're going to learn a lot about his background. He's actually an immigrant, if you will, is an adopted immigrant, and he's got a wonderful family who have put so much stock into raising this fine young man. He's founded an organization called the Student Veterans Foundation. It's dedicated to developing programs for supporting veterans on college campuses. He has also founded Strike for Vets, which is an organization focused on raising funding and awareness for veterans programs. All in all, through these programs, Daniel's Eagle Scout project has brought attention to his funding. Without further ado, I'm going to bring Daniel in here in just a second. Stand by. I'll be right back after this quick break.
Steel Truth, real journalism delivered here with your host, Ann Vandersteel.
And welcome back. We've got Daniel Bolan here with us this afternoon, or evening as it were. Daniel, I've just sort of read off the very surface of your extremely deep resume. First of all, I'm tired just trying to put all that out there. Do you ever get tired doing everything that you do? I mean, how do you do this?
I do, but good time management and planning. And thank you for having me on your show, by the way. Oh,
it's a pleasure to have you on. It's not often when you meet people with the pedigree and resume that you have, and you really have a remarkable story. You were adopted from Europe, and essentially, when your parents found you, they were told that you had disabilities, and they were fine with that. They brought you home and nurtured you, and you've absolutely blossomed into an extraordinary young man with potential that's frankly limitless. And as your dad and I were talking, the only thing stopping you from being president of the United States is that you were not born in this country. And that's really, as far as I can see, the only thing that would stop you from that. So I want to talk to you about your aspirations, but I want to find out who Daniel Bolan is. Like, what got you so engaged in such acts of philanthropy, obviously, being aggressive with your studies and having a depth and breadth of what you're trying to accomplish. What is the makeup of Daniel? Why are you so driven?
I'm driven because I want to prove something to the world and make something out of the millennial generation. My love for philanthropy started years back when I was going for my Eagle Scout project, and I created a memorial garden dedicated to those who died to needless violence, drug violence, gun violence, and all sorts of violence down in the Orlando area community, and I raised $52,000 for it. And I wanted it to be a garden where people could come and reflect, pray, if they will, and just to focus on their life and everything that's going on.
So go ahead.
Yes, please.
No. I continue on because that's, not many people, first of all, make it to Eagle Scout. Number two, raise that kind of money at that age. And number three, actually decide to look around their community and go, how can I make a difference? I mean, that's a fairly significant impact statement you just made.
Yes, and that's what one of the things the Orange County mayor said when she gave me the Orange County Citizen of the Year award, was that she doesn't see a lot of kids like this. And so I think that really kickstarted my love for philanthropy and giving back to my community, because our communities need to be pulled together in the best of times and even in the worst of times.
I agree. And right now, this country has seen the best of times. Most recently, with the coronavirus, we've seen what I would consider some of the worst of times. But we're seeing leadership in our president that reminds us the best is yet to come. So on that note, with respect to what you're doing for veterans, because without our veterans, frankly, this country stands on the shoulders of our veterans. We would be speaking a foreign language. I don't even know if we would be a republic or, living through a democracy if it wasn't for our veterans. We might be a completely different country at this point. Tell me why you are so motivated to support veterans, because you have two different organizations that do such.
Yes, both of my grandfathers were veterans, and I started Strike for Vets already with a love for veterans. And so the Strike for Vets was started in a small Tampa community where we raise funding and awareness through bowling tournaments, actually, for veterans charities who are doing good work in their communities, as well as starting the Student Veterans Foundation now that I'm in college and giving back to those who served our country and are now trying to pursue their degree and their career fields.
Tell me, do you think that the Student Veterans Foundation is going to explode across college campuses? What have you seen in terms of response from campuses that you've approached, and how many are you in at this point in time?
Well, we are just starting small. We're talking with a bunch of different colleges at the moment, including right here, mainly in Central Florida, because that's where I am and where I go to school.
All right. And
what was your second question?
What is the response from the colleges? In other words, when you approach the school and you ask them, and you tell them what you're doing, what is their response? Because you obviously have a philosophy as to why students. Your Student Veteran Foundation is so significant. There is an issue that is of concern to you. So when I'd like you to explain the issue, and then when you approach the school, do they understand and see the issue the same way you do for our student veterans?
Well, many of the colleges that we talk to have mixed opinions. They recognize that student veterans face many different issues, such as age difference, depression, loneliness, sexual assault in some cases, and so they recognize the problem. But their current solution with the organizations that they have now in place and these Veterans Resource Centers are simply not getting it done. The resource centers on campuses are underfunded and understaffed, and as the Student Veterans Foundation, our goal is to enhance the programs that are already on the college campuses any way we can, and that's with on-campus and off-campus resources to help the student veteran from the first time they get on campus the way into their career field the best we can.
Why do you suppose that these student veterans are so underfunded on college campuses? Because I know that this administration has spent a lot of money on our military as of recent to upgrade facilities, upgrade equipment. Do you think it's just being overlooked about the veterans that are returning back to college campuses to continue their education at this time?
I think veterans issues and the issues that they are facing and their families are facing are being overlooked. Many colleges that we've talked to, they have the programs in place, but I talk to the veterans and their families on these campuses, and they are still a little lost and a little clueless on what their actual resource center is trying to do for them. And so at the Student Veterans Foundation, we're trying to pinpoint the needs of student veterans as well as help their families, because their families have served just as much as the veterans themselves have.
Of course. Tell me, what do you see as to be the number one need for these families of veterans that are trying to go back and get their education?
Connectivity. I think, especially for one of the veterans that I've talked to who's in his upper 50s, 60s, he doesn't feel as if he's connected to the different student populations such as myself. And it's very hard for him to relate to the different thing that students, regular students, are going through. And so I think getting student veterans and their families connected into the regular college life and college atmosphere would be one way that we can slowly help these student veterans and their college experience.
Do you think that veterans in general, in other words, I guess my question is stemming from veterans a lot of times don't even have an education at all. They come back to college, like you said, they're 50 years old, and they're saying, what am I going to do now? I have my 20 years in the military, I have a career. Maybe it wasn't a job that actually gave them a skill set that will be functional in the real world after at a pay level they can afford to live. So they need to go back to school and acquire new skills. When
they essentially fall through the cracks.
Okay, so they're falling through the cracks. I'm just wondering, why hasn't the administration, or why haven't any administrations addressed this issue before? Why do you think this has been such a neglected issue?
I think that what the current administration, as well as many administrations, whether at the state level or whatever else, are doing good work for veterans, but they're not focusing as much on the student veterans. They're just focusing on the veterans population as a whole, which is good, but we need to sort of hone in on where we need to focus our studies, because these people need help and they want help. The problem is some organizations just don't know how to provide help and how to go about doing that.
What about our local congressman in Florida, or even through the state of Florida? Are you working through any of the folks like Brian Mast, for instance? He's is my congressman down here in the Florida 18th district. He's obviously a disabled veteran. He's now serving this would be his third term he's running for. Have you tried and approached him with what you're trying to do to see if you can get support at the congressional level?
We have talked to our congressmen. They have not been very responsive.
Who is your congressman?
Darren Soto.
Okay. And he's not been responsive?
No. When we went up there to Washington, I had a very fun time going around and seeing all the congressmen and congresswomen as well as senators. But one of the things was they're never hesitant to get a picture with you. But when you ask them to follow up, that's sort of not their thing.
Right. I'm familiar with that problem.
I figured you would, but
Oh yeah, no, we're familiar with that problem. I'd like to talk a little bit about your foundation, Student Veterans Foundation. I'm going to put it up here on the screen because I think it's important people take a look at what you're doing here. You have obviously your mission statement, and I'd like to throw that up on the screen, but you've done some incredible work all over. And I'd like to read this aloud. 1/4 of student veterans are severely depressed, and more than a third suffer from acute anxiety. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, affects close to half of student veterans, with those who survive deployment at increased risk of suicide. Student Veterans Foundation is a nationwide nonprofit organization and movement that works to address these issues. Headquartered in Tampa, we rely on evidence-based methods for supporting and serving veterans on college campuses as they transition to civilian life. Our multifaceted programs are offered on and off campus to students and their families to help them embrace hope, identify new pathways for success as best they can. This is the part that's so baffling to me. When I consider what you're trying to do, and it's a very significant effort, and I look at campaigns out there like Young America's Foundation, Turning Point USA, to name a few, they have worked diligently to get across through college campuses and been received with open arms. It surprised me at the beginning of the interview, frankly, to hear you say you've had some mixed feedback from some of the colleges and universities you've approached. Why do you think that is?
They are simply satisfied with the current system that they have. And it's a system that is not working to the best of its ability for these veterans and for their families, and it needs to be fixed. To pull from politics, I think we've seen with this current administration, a lot of people were used to the norm in American politics. And then when the current administration came in, they saw him as kind of a disruptor to everything. And they keep bashing and bashing head on. And so that is sort of what we're seeing with the Student Veterans Foundation. And it's our mission to point out that we are not trying to work against them. We are not trying to be the enemy. We are trying to work with them and build a coalition around these student veterans and their families, because ultimately, dividing is not going to bring us together. We need to come together for one sole issue.
Fair enough. Let's talk a little bit about your programs on campus, because it's fairly significant. I'd like you to walk the audience through some of your internal program highlights in terms of the accredited school program, your on-campus team program, etc. Give people a flavor of what they can expect if there's an audience member out there that is a veteran that'd like to become a student, or they already are, but they are unaware of what your services are offering. What can you tell them they can look forward to?
Yes, so one of our on-campus programs is an accredited college course that student veterans can take, sort of like an introductory course from the structured environment of the military to the unstructured environment of a college campus. And what can they expect? What are college students about and their life on campus as well as off campus? And basically just the general blueprint of how student veterans can go about getting involved in different clubs and associations and be better connected as a normal student would be.
What has been the most rewarding thing that you've encountered on this journey supporting student veterans around the country, specifically starting here in Florida?
Simply seeing the face when we tell student veterans that we're going to guide them from their very first day on a college campus all the way to their career. Because while there are some programs out there that say they do that, we want to make sure that we're keeping up with them daily, weekly, to make sure that anything we can do within our scope of resources, we can do to help them.
All right, let's talk a little bit about you now, because you have, like I said, an incredible resume. I'm going to just rewind the clock here. You major in political science, international affairs. You're also taking Russian and analytical intelligence at FSU. Being a Seminole, very competitive school up there. We know how our Florida schools are highly competitive. And you've also gotten volunteer experience under Tae Kwon Do. You've got your black belt there. You're a championship bowler. What is next for Daniel Bolan? What do you want to see? Where do you want to see yourself in 5 years, in 10 years, in 35 years?
Potentially in working as one of the government agencies or as a lawyer or a diplomat. I think there's many open routes for me. Just picking which one I like the best is sort of where I'm looking to go.
Well, if you were to say, in my 5-year goal, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That's probably more immediate, seeing that you're in college now and you've got a fairly sophisticated resume already.
I see myself going through graduate or law school,
okay,
and then opening up myself to the DC market once after that.
What kind of law do you want to study?
Preferably international law, because I have a background with being international and studying a critical international language.
All right. Looking at today's current political landscape, we're now starting to understand the scandal-plagued previous administrations. Let's just say everything that they were trying to hide from us because they wanted to maintain a scandal-free administration is now coming out. We're learning a lot about the previous 8 years before the Trump presidency, and we're finding out that Americans have been taken advantage of, not only in this country, but around the world. And we found some of our allies, those citizens, have also been taken advantage of. if you were going to look at the landscape from a political journey, in other words, if you wanted to get involved into politics at some point in the future, what would you like to see yourself tackling? If you were old enough to tackle it now, what would you see yourself saying, I want to make sure that X never happens again?
Ultimately, I want to make sure that the suicides that we are seeing from veterans and student veterans go away, so that we have enough programs out there for when they're in any sort of crisis, we have resources that are available to them free of charge or minimal of charge so that they can get the help they need.
You handled that question beautifully, just like a politician. I was driving you right into the political suicide trap, and you brought it right back to the Student Veteran Foundation. Absolutely brilliant. See, you've already cut it in politics, Daniel. You should have no problem jumping in that game if you decide to so choose. Wow, very impressive. All right, what else can you tell our viewers about yourself that only you uniquely know, that is probably not one that is bragged on a lot by, say, your family?
Oh, wow.
It's okay. You can brag on yourself. It's fine.
That's a difficult one.
Well, if you ever want to consider life in politics, you've got to be able to stand up and tell people all your accomplishments. But what's one that you kind of like to, I don't want to say keep under the hood, but one that maybe doesn't come up too often?
I wouldn't say this one stays under the hood, but my 2016 Florida State High School Bowling State Championship win, that was definitely a proud and humbling moment in my life. You know, with athletes when they practice for hours and hours, years on end, and they accomplish one of their biggest goals in life in high school, it's always a remarkable thing to experience and to go through, especially family and friends who have been cheering you on and pushing you on from day one.
Absolutely. All right. How can folks follow you, find you, and support what you're doing over at your Student Veterans Foundation?
Yes, you can go to studentveteransfoundation.org. I see it's been under my name for the broadcast, so you can go to that website, click there, see all the programs, and know more about us, as well as donate if you so wish. And any way you would like to get involved with our mission, you can. And
Wonderful.
Another thing as well, on the student veteran side, is I'm actually releasing a book, so add that to the list.
I see that. Forgotten Leaders. When is it due out, Daniel?
Late May. We're publishing it for May 27th, and that will give viewers a little more insight on my history with going to college campuses and learning what student veterans are going through, as well as how we can help them and reach out to them.
Fantastic. The links to the books and to the printing press are all in the description box below. So by all means, I know my moderators are dropping that in the chat right now, but please check it out. Follow Daniel. Check out his website. What he's doing is absolutely extraordinary. Like I said, I've interviewed a lot of people, including Charlie Kirk, and it's very rare when you meet somebody who has accomplished so much at the tender age of Daniel. That's it's a refreshing change to talk to a millennial who wants to raise the bar for his millennial patriots around him. And I'm very appreciative of all that you've done and the fact that you've had some incredible parents to bring you into this world and raise you right, because we don't see that too often anymore. And I'm a parent, so I know from what I'm talking about. I've got kids your age, but I'm very, very impressed, and it's an honor to have the opportunity to speak with you this evening.
Thank you. Same with you.
All right. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will catch you for another edition of The Steel Truth. Good night, everybody.